This is the Crowdcrux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Briggman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project with your host, Sal Briggman.
Before we get started with this podcast episode, I want to take a second to introduce you to my friends at Fulfillrite. If you need help shipping out your Kickstarter or Indiegogo perks or rewards, Fulfillrite is the absolute best company for you. I've been working with them for a while and I can vouch for their services. They make it dead simple and take all of the headache out of shipping out all of those boxes, all of those orders to your backers and your customers. If you want to check them out, go to fulfillrite.com at fulfillrite.com. What up, crowdfunders? Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. On this show, we get into what is working right now in terms of getting traffic, in terms of getting funding. How do you actually launch a business on Kickstarter? How do you go from having a crowdfunding campaign to then launching a 6 or 7 figure online store and transforming your life at the same time? Yeah, I think that we kind of throw out the fact that entrepreneurship or startups, but what I try to do with this show is to really bring it real and authentic to you. These are real people that I'm talking with. They're real entrepreneurs who, they quit their 9-to-5 job in order to pursue their passion, and then hit it really big on Kickstarter. They do a 6-figure or a 7-figure campaign, and it totally transforms and changes their life. When I was getting started, at least with my own business, it always felt like people were out of reach. I saw all these other people being successful online, but I was like, how do I get in? How do I get in on the party? How do I also join in? And for those out there now that are just starting a crowdfunding campaign or starting a Kickstarter campaign, I hope that this episode inspires you to start your own comic book, to start your own graphic novel, because I brought on one of the foremost experts in this industry when it comes to launching a crowdfunding campaign around comics, and that is Tyler James, who is also the host of the Comix Launch podcast. So Tyler also came on this podcast in episode on number 158, the battle-tested Kickstarter launch plan for comics, graphic novels, and more. And he's come back to share some even more of his findings in the past year, the things that he's unearthed and uncovered. He's going to bring that directly to you and kind of give you a glimpse, almost like to get on the fast track, if you will, for launching your own project on Kickstarter and also making the most of this experience. I think you're going to like today's episode a lot. Tyler is a complete expert in this space. He's very well known for his work with comic books. I think you're going to really enjoy it a lot. In addition, the other quick thing that I want to mention was if you're looking for a very low-cost way to begin to upgrade your learning, you're looking to learn about some of the tried and true practices that go into a Kickstarter campaign. You want to get more access to some of the things that actually work when it comes to driving traffic. You want to learn about different resources that are out there, and you also don't want to break the budget. I have a great discount available for you today that will give you a 95% discount. Yes, you heard that right, 95% on my course on Udemy, the Kickstarter Launch Formula. So this course is meant to accompany my book, The Kickstarter Launch Formula, which is available on Audible, Amazon. You can check it out at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter Formula or just search it on Amazon. But this course is basically video training modules that accompany the book, and it's a great introductory course when it comes to launching a successful Kickstarter campaign. You can also learn more about my coaching and how I help with different projects in that course. It's a very non-invasive way. I think there's so many different, we had over 100 students enrolled in that course. It's a bestseller on Udemy. Tons of people have left positive reviews, so I think you'd really like it a lot. And this is a great offer. You're getting 95% off. It's virtually I think it's a no-brainer, honestly. So if you want that link, the link is crowdcrux.com/Udemy promo. That link is crowdcrux.com/Udemy promo. That's crowdcrux.com/Udemy promo. Now, the only thing I ask is, I'm giving you this great discount. It would mean so much to me if you left a positive review on Udemy, or at least you left your authentic thoughts, the things you liked, maybe even just something that I could improve on. Would mean so much to me if you did that. Without further ado, let's get into today's podcast episode. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Today we have the legendary Tyler James from the Comix Launch podcast and website and blog. He runs awesome websites and he teaches artists and independent people out there how to publish comic books, how to launch successful Kickstarter campaigns. He shares it all, and we have him here right now. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Sal. Excited to be chatting with you once again. It's been a while. It's crazy how time flies when you're crowdfunding, right?
Time flies. You got a 12-month-old right now?
13. Yeah, 13 and going on everything. He he plays big.
That's awesome, man. Life goes fast. And just even think the last time we talked, crowdfunding is so different. Like, the industry has changed a lot. New stuff are coming out, new projects. It's been really exciting.
It definitely has. And that's one of the reasons why I was excited to connect with you again, because I'm a little more myopic in terms of where I focus. I tend to niche down and focus on mostly on the comics, graphic novels, and art, like the kind of things that writers, artists, and publishers are putting out into the world. And I also tend to focus primarily on the Kickstarter platform. We will occasionally talk a little bit about Indiegogo and Patreon and some other things like that, but that's the bulk of where I've been focused. And I know you cover the entire waterfront, which is kind of fun. But there's been some cool developments in the niches that I really do focus on, specifically comics and comics on Kickstarter. And it's what's interesting is like comics on Kickstarter is definitely not one of the biggest in terms of a total funding raised on Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. But over the past several years, the success rate for comic projects on Kickstarter has dramatically risen. Like overall, if you take all of the Kickstarter data, right, comics is number 3 in terms of the highest success rate for projects that get launched. But if you look at what's happened over, say, the past 4 years or so, the comics Kickstarter success rate has raised by about 7 percentage points.
Why is that?
Whereas like Kickstarter overall is actually down about 2 percentage points since I've been starting to really pay attention to that.
Yeah, why is that happening?
Yeah, I think it's for a lot of reasons, and I think these are actually reasons that even if I know you have some mega listeners or people that launch like these massive projects in all sorts of different categories and tech and everything else, but I do think there's a number of things that creators can learn from what the comics creators are getting right.
So like what's causing that to happen? Why is it that we're seeing more projects that are in the comic space to actually have higher success rates than some of the other categories out there?
I think there's a number of reasons. One is that comics actually has the highest percentage of return backers, right? And as you probably know, getting that first successful Kickstarter under your belt is going to make future success more possible for you, right? Because when you launch that second campaign, you already have at least some sort of support from or some sort of ability to reach back out to past backers. Mm-hmm. And that Kickstarter update to past backers on a previous project is one of the easiest ways to get funding for your next project.
100%.
Yeah. And so a big percentage of the creators that launch in the comics category have actually already had a successful launch under their belt. And so that's part of the reason.
I think it's like, I was also just looking here. So You put together a really cool book or guide, 9 savvy strategies that are successful for comic creators that are using to crowdfund their projects on Kickstarter. According to your guide, last year, a record 1,457 comics were actually funded on Kickstarter, and that's a 14% increase from the previous year. And that's no small peanuts. That's a lot of comic books, a lot of people that are starting new careers and being able to do what they love and for a living. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty awesome stat. And especially when you look at actually who's getting these projects funded, because while there are these massive projects that are out there, and there are creators that, you know, are doing their 5th, their 8th, their 10th, their 15th launch successfully, and have built up, you know, sort of a machine over on Kickstarter, the majority of that funding is actually going to creators with relatively small fan bases, and a lot of those are actually first timers as well. Mm-hmm. And so, 75% of all comic projects on Kickstarter actually are raising less than $10,000. But I think that's great, because it just shows that, you know, there's an entry point for even creators with small audiences. And actually, the last time I was on your show, there was a creator. I'll give him there was a creator that went and listened to the podcast, and he was actually kind of inspired to hear that it's not just all about these massive projects that get all the coverage. Like with, you know, I don't know about you, but when I was just getting started out, I could do a lot with $1,000 launch or a $3,000 launch or a $5,000 launch. Like that would be awesome, right?
It's not all about the funding, because it's really about the people that you're helping, and it's also about having your work out there in the hands of other individuals. Like they could actually read a comic and they can be inspired by that character, and they can take that and like it impacts their life in a small way. I mean, Elon Musk is even famous for saying how much he loved comic books and like how much that impacted his career. You know, so you don't necessarily need lots of funding to be able to do that. You don't need like, you know, $500,000 to do that. But I think, you know, over the last 6 years, it looks like you've been working one-on-one with creators. You've helped launch over, you know, 15 projects, 16 projects. You've been doing a small dent here, I think, in the universe. And I guess I want to ask you first, what's been your favorite project that you've worked on? And you can tell the story a little bit of that artist or that creator.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do a combination of things, right? In addition to what the education and the sort of inspiration and highlighting of strategies that are working on Kickstarter that I do for my Comix Launch work, I am also a full-time publisher. And so I'm the publisher of Comix Tribe, which is an independent comics and graphic novel imprint. And we also do have a children's book wing or brand called C is for Cthulhu, which is one of the, you know, top children's book brands that have launched on Kickstarter. Like just that brand has done over $250,000 on Kickstarter for over a number of launches. And so, so I have the projects that I sort of work on myself, and then I have the community of the Comix Launch Comix Launch Pro community that I coach and get up and running. And so there's in terms of projects that I've sort of managed and run, because, you know, as much as we can be looked upon as sort of crowdfunding experts or gurus, et cetera, the fact is, like, the platform is always changing. It's always evolving. It's always, things are mixing and up. And so I still just consider myself a practitioner on it. And I love trying new things with every launch, and I learn something new with every launch. So in terms of a launch that I did, like one of my favorite launches that I actually have ever done was a launch that we did last year with the C is for Cthulhu campaign. And what was great about that launch is I did something that was probably on hindsight pretty crazy. I launched that campaign 3 days after we brought home my son.
Oh my gosh.
And that would be nuts for anyone that does not, or for anyone doing their first Kickstarter campaign, or anyone that didn't have a real strategy to.
How did your wife let you do that?
Honestly, the cool thing about that launch was that it was the least stressful, shortest launch, and it still did very well. I think it did over $30,000. I'm not sure exactly what it did, but it did that in about 2 weeks. And some of the reasons why I liked it so much is that we kept it simple. And so there was really just one new product that we were offering during that launch, and that was like a a stuffed pillow based around our Cthulhu design, and it was like a blanket stuffed pillow. So it was a really cool thing. But it was a product that I had already, like, we had already completed it, we'd already done it. We had actually already put in the first order for it. So another thing that was cool about it was that we had it was a limited edition run. So we actually just capped it at 500 units of that item. Mm-hmm. And so that was another way to take some of the stress off it, where it wasn't even that we were trying to sell as many as possible. It was that we had these many to sell, and we were going to try to sell as many of them or all of them if we could. Mm-hmm. And then if we got extras, we also sold a lot of our backlist products as, in special packages. And so that was one reason that it made it easier. I basically outsourced the bulk of my promotion during the campaign to Mark Zuckerberg by running Facebook ads. And so I was not, beating the drum and trying to get press and trying to do all of that stuff. And then also we had a big built-in audience thanks to previous successful Kickstarter launches, such that most of what I was doing was answering backer questions that were coming in, and there weren't a ton because we, did a pretty detailed Kickstarter page, and that was all set to go. And I had worked on that sort of steadily before putting the trigger, and so it was there wasn't a lot of stress there. But some of those things, limiting what I was doing from on the promotion side of things, making sure that the launch didn't get too crazy with stretch goals and other things, and limiting the time that the launch went. It was great, and awesome, I spent most of the time with my baby boy during that launch, and it still moved our business forward. So
very cool. So I'm looking at your guide. I think there's a lot of great tips and advice in here. I think we've also talked a lot on this podcast about launching a project. One of the things we haven't really focused on as much is what happens after crowdfunding. The sort of that post crowdfunding phase, and how this event of raising money and gathering a crowd, how that can impact your business and your career going forward. Do you think you can talk a little bit about that, sort of the post campaign strategy and like advice you have on that, and honestly any short stories that you have of people who have built a business off of Kickstarter or your work, etc.?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting platform, and I tell creators, if you could master just one platform to get yourself going, Kickstarter is going to be the one that you want to focus on. I had a creator, I've been creating comics since I was 12 years old, and sold my first one at age 14 out of my backpack in high school. I think I sold 9 copies for $1 a piece, but I had on my podcast a few years ago a creator who was 16 years old, had the first launch that their team had put together, and ended up raising over $4,000 for that very 16. First launch. Yeah, in high school, and
that's insane, man.
And so so it's just a different ballpark in terms of what's possible through the magnetizing effect of Kickstarter. But you are absolutely right that 92% of the year, most creators do not have a project on Kickstarter. And if the only place that and time that you have to sell is when you're launching a Kickstarter, you're going to find that it's feast for 1 month out of the year and then famine most of the rest of the time. And so that is why once creators have a successful launch, and what I really encourage them to try to build, and I try to help them build, is not just a successful launch, but build a launch system so that you can replicate this success with any project in any market again and again and again by following a set of steps. And that's what's great about Kickstarter, and I see a lot of creators that get really good with that. But then expanding into channels beyond that can be difficult or can be a challenge. For Comix Tribe, though, it was an absolute game changer. And I can point to a number of areas. Like Kickstarter was the catalyst for us. My first Kickstarter campaign was for a graphic novel. We were shooting for $8,500. We raised $26,000. And what was great about that is, for the first time in my creative business, like, money or cash was not the constraint. we now had the cash in. It was now up to us to decide what to do with that. And so yes, I put a bulk of that towards fulfilling the Kickstarter, but I was also able to have some cash in hand that we were able to invest into looking into getting distribution for our books and get them into the direct market. And so shortly after that first Kickstarter, we were able to get a diamond distribution deal. And then that basically was our entryway into the worldwide comic book and graphic novel market, and distribution into the 2,200 shops around the world that carry comics and graphic novels. And we've been with them ever since. Another cool thing that I would not have saw happening since but ended up happening is through a number of successful Kickstarter launches. We were able to attract some people that were interested in licensing our books for foreign markets, and so to date we've now done 4 foreign licensing deals for some of our books that are have books being published into other markets. We've also we're able to realize that Amazon would be a very good channel for some of our products, and there's a whole different model for getting books selling over there. And so Kickstarter was the catalyst, but we didn't stop there. And it's still it's still an important part of my overall business model and my overall strategy, but it's definitely not the only part.
Really cool, dude. So I do have some questions in terms of lessons you'd like to impart to the audience. Also, I really like that phrase, use diamond distribution deal. That should be like a book title, I think.
well, Diamond is actually the name of the distributor. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Comix Limited. So yeah. They haven't actually paid us in diamonds.
That would be dope. The other thing I wanted to ask you here is I'm seeing more and more people use Patreon. And Drip is kind of like the verses of Patreon, Drip and Patreon. What are your thoughts on using a subscription-based crowdfunding site like that instead of Kickstarter nowadays if you're creating like an online comic or something like that? I gotta introduce you to a killer resource, The Gadget Flow. Their website reaches more than 28 million people per month. Brands like DJI, HP, and Pioneer have used them to increase awareness and boost sales, along with more than 4,000 crowdfunding campaigns. They have a new unboxing series on YouTube where you can get your product unboxed by a tech expert. Lastly, you can get feedback for your crowdfunding campaign and increase conversions by using Crowd Insight. You can check them out at thegadgetflow.com.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of great comic book creators that will show us that it is not Kickstarter or Patreon. It is Kickstarter and Patreon, depending upon what you're doing. So a great example of this is there's a creator who is one of the godfathers of webcomics. His name is Brad Geiger. He runs webcomics.com, and he has a very successful Patreon. I think it does between $6,000 or $7,000 a month, and he sort of looks at Patreon as almost like his salary. And he has hundreds of backers that are supporting him at anywhere between $1 and 25 or above higher on Patreon. And what they're supporting him for is they're supporting him for ongoing creative work and exclusive membership access to additional content above and beyond the ongoing work that he does every week on his webcomic Evil Inc. and that he's been doing for the past 20 years or so. He's been putting out webcomics. Mm-hmm. And so if you are a creator that is putting out ongoing creative work, in most cases, some of that work or most of that work even is available for free. And that's sort of the way he looks at it is his free work, his webcomic is marketing for his Patreon premium experience. And so he sort of has a multiple levels there. But when it comes time to actually print a book or to launch a new big initiative or a new project, he's going to do that on Kickstarter. And what many creators are finding is that the best Kickstarter creators also tend to have the biggest Patreon followings as well. And so it's not which one it's not you have to choose which one. It's both. As long as you are someone that's putting out that ongoing creative work. That's
so interesting. Yeah, it almost makes me think of like how a song is an advertisement for a concert. Like that's really where the artists are making their money, is like touring around, and like the fans actually get that experience. They get this sort of insular community. They have to pay for it, but like it's such a rocking good time. But the song is kind of what grabs people in and makes them want to have that experience, So
well, yeah, and I mean, most, like, if you look at the top 10 comics of all time, most of them were web comics first, which means you can read 90 to 100% of the books that they're selling when they launch their Kickstarters. You can, like, most of those have been available online in some cases for years. And so, but why is this? Well, because people always want the souvenir, and people want to support people are always going to have bookshelves. And so there's a difference between having a book and having a product versus having something that's available online. So that's part of it. But also, like, they built up so much goodwill over the years that they're able to tap into that when it comes time to launch.
So you have a bit of a platform here. People are listening right now. You're an expert when it comes to raising money for comic books. You're also pretty familiar with the publishing process of different players out there. What's one bit of advice you'd like to impart to the audience, in terms of, it could be a lesson learned, it could be a mistake to be aware of, just something that you'd like to impart? What would be your first takeaway there?
Yeah, so I want to point out the importance of taking a launch serialization mindset when you jump onto Kickstarter, as opposed to setting up in your head this idea that your first launch has to be this massive thing, and you have to go for broke with it. Shoot for the moon is great career advice. They say shoot for the moon. If you don't hit it, you'll end up in the stars, yada, yada. Like, yeah, that's good career advice. I want everyone out there to be wildly ambitious and go for it. But it's kind of awful Kickstarter advice, because if you don't land on the moon, meaning if you don't hit your goal, you don't end up in the stars, you end up right back down on the ground, because it's all or nothing funding. And so one of the things that the comic book creators tend to be is they tend to set attainable goals for where they're at in their career. And many of them will, instead of trying to go for the biggest possible thing that they can envision with their first launch, they break it up. And so a great example of this is a creator named Charlie Stickney. Charlie Stickney launched a series a few years ago called White Ash. Mm-hmm. And just like a dark fantasy series. And his first launch, raised $13,000. Now, and that was great. He asked for like 8, raised 13, was able to make the book, was able to get it out there, and turns out it's really good, right? But Charlie didn't stop there. Several months or shortly after delivering his rewards to his backers, right after delivering rewards to your backers, that's the perfect time to launch your next campaign. And so that's what Charlie did. He launched a campaign for White Ash numbers 1 through 2. All right. And so, and now that next launch raised even more. And then shortly after those rewards arrived in the backers, he launched for White Ash numbers 1 through 3. Then again, White Ash numbers 1 through 4. And now he has the collected hardcover edition. And so to date, I think, by the time this launch is over, Charlie, a first-time comic creator with his first series, is going to have a series that has raised over $100,000 on the Kickstarter platform without any distribution in the direct market, without anywhere, just on Kickstarter, and built in from scratch. But if you compare that to what would have happened if Charlie instead said, well, I need to raise, I want to raise $50,000 to fund my graphic novel, even though he had never put out a single issue of a comic. What do you think would have happened with that first launch?
Yeah, I think one of the big things there would be he's just building up almost, and he's like maintaining momentum and sort of building up to that big raise. But at that point in his career, he can't command such a huge funding goal, Yeah. So it's not going to go over well. He's going to become demoralized. He's not going to, like Kickstarter, maybe being like this, this thing doesn't even work. But because he took a different approach, more of serialization approach, I think you called it, then he's going to be more successful in the long term. Yeah,
I'm looking at a project that I backed last year called the Right Press, the No Mess French Press. And, they had an awesome campaign. Brilliant video, great page, tons of endorsements, and it met a need as someone that cooks the coffee, that French presses the coffee in my house and always has to clean the pot out. It was this thing that really it resonated me. I went and I backed it, and so did 21,770 other backers. It raised over $1 million. But fast forward to today, the campaign, I believe, is now like $500,000 supposedly in debt. Had to refund or provide coupons to a ton of backers, and the reason was because they, instead of just offering one product, they tried to offer like a bunch of different SKUs, and such that like one small mistake didn't affect just one product, it affected all up and down. And I look at where this company would be had they just launched one product, and then every 6 months had sold that product again, and then a new version for one of those different models, and just did that again and again and again, they'd be in such better shape. Yeah, granted, they probably wouldn't have raised $1 million with that first launch, but they would have done it in a way that didn't put them so far underwater. And I see a lot of creators take off way more than they should handle with the first launch. And I think some people still have that mentality that you only get one shot at a Kickstarter, and so you've got to go for broke with it, and that's not true. If you deliver on your promises to backers, Kickstarter is a well that you can go to again and again and again, and every time you go to it, you'll pick up more steam and more backers.
Now, for the first time creator, we're listening to what you're saying, and I think it's super inspirational, man. Like, I think it's awesome that people are raising money. They're doing 4 campaigns or 5 campaigns, but they're kind of like, Tyler, I don't know if this is gonna work for me, because I'm kind of introverted. I don't know if I want to put myself out there. I'm pretty inexperienced. What if people say stuff like, they're like, hey, the last Kickstarter that I got, like the packaging was damaged or something.
Yep.
Or they're like, hey, I don't really know like if this is even going to appeal to people. Like, for someone with such like high uncertainty like that, what do you say to them? And in terms of these like objections that you might get as well, which can be kind of demoralizing, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's awesome. And here's one thing that it's actually one of the strategies in the strategy guide that you mentioned. And anyone that wants to get it, this is basically, I believe all crowdfunders can learn a thing or two from what comic creators are doing. And so that's why I put together this new free strategy guide highlighting some of the cool things that I've seen as a student of the platform. And so you can get that at comixlaunch.com/funded if you want to check that out. But one of the strategies in there is to become an objections crusher, right? You need to understand that what you're asking people to do is actually kind of pretty crazy. You're asking people to give you their hard-earned money for a product that probably doesn't exist yet, and to trust you that you're going to deliver it to them, close to when you say you're going to do it. And yet that works time and time again if you can build enough trust in it. But you got to understand that besides like people that are your diehard fans, your super fans, your past customers, and your parents and family, most people are going to hit your campaign and they're going to have some of those objections. And so one of the best things to do is to call out those objections on your Kickstarter page, in your copy, think about and anticipate what everyone could possibly, object to backing, and flip that around. And so one of the things that you mentioned was packaging, right? Packaging, like I backed a Kickstarter and it showed up and my mailman shoved it into my mailbox, and it absolutely got crushed. Well, creator in my community, Comix Launch Pro community, Ryan Kroboth, did an amazing job doing something that more people in just about every single Kickstarter category could benefit from. And what he basically did was he turned his packaging into a feature and a benefit. He recognized that a lot of crowdfunder backers have had that experience of stuff arriving and it gets dinged up. And so what he decided to do that most creators do not do is on his Kickstarter page, he actually had a section where he told and explained exactly how he would be packaging the core rewards for his package. And so he like even mocked it up and said, and comics is one of those industries where there are a lot of collectors, and if a staple is slightly bent, or if there's even a ding or a crease anywhere in it, they don't even want the book, right? And so for the certain collector class, calling out exactly how you will package it, exactly what they can expect to get your for it to arrive in, and and make it clear how important that is to you and for your backers is key. Now, Ryan did that. He also does something kind of unique and on brand where he has these little plastic ninjas, right? and he with that, anytime he ships anything to anyone, he'll include one of these little plastic ninjas in the shipping. And he says, "Is your package will be protected by ninjas? Who messes with ninjas? No one." And then he went one more step further and included a risk reversal where he said, if your package arrives damaged or is dinged up for any reason, I'll replace it, no charge. That's great. So there's addressing objections, and there's turning what is an afterthought for most creators into, calling it out as a feature. Because here's the other thing that does. If you see a creator and that is giving you the details on how they're going to package their books and ship it out to you, that sends a message, whether you know it or not, sends a message that this creator's thought of everything.
Yeah, that's true. And it also kind of like adds a little bit of personality, I think, to it. It kind of like makes the person be like, oh, this is another human being. Like, they're not just trying to make a buck on this. It kind of allows you to be more creative in your packaging, in your campaign design, like all these different things. And I also think for someone who's just getting started with maybe doing their first publishing project, like their first comic book, there are a lot of uncertainties that come with it, but there are ways you can turn those objections into benefits and into positive things. And I think it's always about trying to look at the positivity. Like, while it's true that a lot of people don't like being sold to, at the same time, if you put your hard work into making a comic book, people deserve to read it. Like, they deserve to be influenced by that. I mean, just think about some of the comic books that maybe you've read over the years, or some of the books that I've read. I'm so happy that I bought some of the books that I have over the years. Like, my life would be so different. And I think it's really the onus is on the creator that if you believe in your work, if you've been working hard at it, if you created something that you think will impact other people for the better, you almost owe it to yourself. Like, you got to do this thing, man. Like, you got to do this. And even if it's a little bit scary to put yourself out there and like it's a little bit intimidating, it can be a really big step, I think, in your career. So this is a ton of good information. I'd love to ask you for like a final tip here, but where can people go, again, that link, just so that they can type that in, the link for this new guide that you've created? Yeah, certainly.
So if you're a fan of podcasts, and if you're a writer, specifically artists, et cetera, definitely go over to comixlaunch.com/subscribe, and you can find the podcast, and we talk more about this kind of stuff. So I know if you're someone like me, I can never get enough podcasts because I always have dogs to walk and dishes to do. So that's that. And then the strategy guide is going on over at comixlaunch.com/funded. So you can get this. And what's cool about the funded guide is, it's about 57 pages. It's a quick read, but it's very actionable. And so we'll talk about the strategy. We'll show it in action in a specific campaign, and then I'll give you some action steps and some resources to implement it yourself. But if you don't have time to read it either, you definitely still want to grab it, because I also provide an audio version of the guide as well, absolutely free, comixlaunch.com/funded. And just sort of one more tip, and this is especially going to that listener of yours, that listener of yours that's probably been listening to you for over a year, and they're inspired every week. They come back, they're inspired, they're hearing more stories, they're getting these grand ideas, they're hearing about $50,000 launches, $100,000 launches, et cetera. But the result of it is that the launch in their head just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're still sitting on the sidelines. Well, there's a listener in my audience named Nathaniel Gold who that was happening to him. He had this desire to create this new comic book series, and he wanted to launch it on Kickstarter, but his launch in his head just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, until he heard the episode that I shared all about the Quickstarter initiative that Kickstarter has been promoting over the past year or so. And basically, the idea behind a Quickstarter style campaign is that it imposes a bunch of limitations on what your project can be, with the goal to get you to actually launch. And so there's a whole set of like 9 rules for Quickstarter projects, but some of them are like the campaign has to be 20 days or less. Your funding goal needs to be less than $1,000. Your main reward has to be under $50. You're not going to do any paid ads. You're not going to do any stretch goals, and et cetera. And then there's some other things, but basically, constraints in so many ways can set you free, because a Kickstarter campaign can be anything, but that's also daunting if you've never done it and it gets so big. And so what Nathaniel did was he ended up just taken the leap, planning his Kickstarter launch in, I think, about a month or so, maybe even a little less. And then he launched it. And you know what? His first launch raised $977 with the support of 54 backers, and that was for the first issue of his book.
Let me tell you about our latest sponsor,
SendPro
SendPro
What was cool
Online
is
by
a couple
Pitney
months later,
Bowes.
he jumped back, did a more traditional style Kickstarter launch for the volume 1 of it, and raised another $2,700
time and money
for,
no matter what
for
you
his
send,
next
from
campaign.
letters and packages to overnights
got him
and
off the
flats.
sidelines and got the
You can
ball
easily compare
rolling.
USPS,
And so, in a lot of ways,
and FedEx,
constraints
and
may just be the thing that
online
you
tool.
need
You
to get off the
shipping
fence
labels
and
and
get your
stamps
project
directly
launched.
from your printer.
Very well said.
You can even
Tyler,
track
thank
all
you
of your
so much for
shipments
coming on the
and
show.
get
Appreciate
email
all the
notifications
great
when they've
info you
arrived.
shared, and
SendPro
we'll have to have
Online
you
is only
back.
$14.99
Awesome,
a
Sal.
month, and
Thanks so
listeners can
much.
get a free 30-day trial when you visit pb.com/crowdcrux. That's pb.com/crowdcrux. Experience the convenience of SendPro Online for yourself when you sign up for a free 30-day trial. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman. Thank you for joining me here on the show today. I hope you got something out of the episode. And also, I want to share something special with you. So, when I was first getting started, it was always my goal to put out quality education and quality information. I think one of the ways you can do that is by having an event, a conference, something that people can attend. And unfortunately, many of you around the world cannot attend an event in New York City. You know, maybe you're in Europe or maybe you're just somewhere else in the United States and you can't attend an event in New York City. So what I wanted to do was I actually hired a videographer to follow me around and to film an event. This is called the FCBC, or For Creators by Creators event, that basically brought on super successful crowdfunders, like people that have raised $5 million, $8 million on Kickstarter. And we had an entire event in New York City. There was probably 80 people there, something like that. So it was a really big event. And what I did was I videoed this for you and to show you. So I actually also interviewed some of these entrepreneurs at the event, and I wanted to deliver this quality education to you 100% free. So if you're interested in watching that and experiencing the conference, you also get to see me as a moderator. You get to see me up there introducing some of the different panelists, and also hear directly from some of these astounding creators what actually worked well for them behind the scenes, and also some of the stuff they might do differently with a crowdfunding campaign. You can go to the link crowdcrux.com/FCBC. That is crowdcrux.com/FCBC. That will take you to the YouTube video where you can watch this 100% free of charge. And you can really experience, I think, this conference and also a different side of me, interacting with some of these cool people. You can also learn a little bit from it. So it's kind of like an interesting entertainment, but also educational video. I hope you enjoy it. And finally, if you would like to enroll in that program that I talked about, the Kickstarter launch formula, and get a ridiculous 95% discount, you can go to crowdcrux.com/Udemy promo. crowdcrux.com/Udemy promo will take you to the page. Just pretty much enroll. You can watch a preview video if you'd like, and you can see all the different reviews that have been posted there. It's a bestseller on Udemy. Some of my best work, really good. I think you'll like it a lot. It's a great introductory course and also at a pretty affordable cost. So again, that's crowdcrux.com/Udemy promo. Thank you for tuning me. Thank you for, sorry to talk so fast here. Thank you for joining me on this episode, and I will see you next time.